Well, pleased to be here talking with Anupam Khanna, and could you please tell me a little bit about your work with GDN?
Thanks. Glad to speak to you. My name, yes, I'm Anupam Khanna, and I have been working with GDN since November. I'm a long-time staff member of the World Bank. Most recently, I've been working with the board and managing the work of the committees for the last 5 years. But I came here in mid-November, and I'm focusing on two proposed areas whereby GDN might have global research programs. One is climate change, and the other is in the area of urbanization. And I'm also working on the whole idea of promoting evidence-based policies and policy-oriented research in developing countries. So I'm working in a couple of other activities related to that.
So as part of this GDN conference here in Kuwait, you had a 2-day workshop on climate change.
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about why GDN launched that and some of the discussions you had, I think, on adaptation.
Yes. Well, GDN, I mean, the reason for GDN to get involved in climate change is sort of, it's, somewhat, I would say, more than self-evident. Yeah. The salience of the problem of climate change, in fact, is obvious to everybody, both in developed and developing countries. Some people call it the defining global challenge of this 21st century. The point about it is that sometimes people don't appreciate the relevance to development. Climate change is really intimately related to development. That's what GDN would focus on, those aspects. One part that people should recognize is that climate change threatens years of socio-economic progress, social and economic development, all the sort of poverty reduction that has taken place. There's a serious threat that some of those gains will be reversed. It's already known that some of the impacts of climate change that people worry about, which is whether due to a secular rise in temperature or extreme weather pattern, changes in precipitation, all of these, the poor bear a disproportionate burden of the cost. And I can go on, but I think this is well recognized. So the question is, why GDN? Because there are a whole bunch of areas. If you look at the whole body of research, now a lot of people are working on it, but there's a severe imbalance between some of the research and facts known about developed countries versus developing countries. Much little work has been done. And some of that, it's, for very obvious reasons, it's not easy for researchers who have the wherewithal, both analytic and otherwise, to organize research in some of these developing countries, especially in areas where some of the most vulnerable populations live. And so GDN feels it has a comparative advantage in organizing this work, and that's why we're doing that.
And so the workshop you had this week, adaptation was one of the big topics of discussion.
Yeah, well, it was, I wouldn't say it was the only topic, but it was one where it featured very prominently, if I had to say one. But there was a general consensus. In fact, some people said that perhaps we should say climate change and development. Some of the things that countries need to do or even be aware of or prepare for, it has both to do with both adaptation and mitigation, the other side. Climate change there are two things that need to be done. One is that emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, the flow of them has to be reduced. Maybe even the stock needs to be reduced. That is, managing what is coming in the future. The other side of it is managing for the inevitable, and that's adaptation. So clearly, what has happened in the past, we are already on the path to some global warming, and that is already having climate effects and again affecting the poor. So we need to focus a lot on that, and that's certainly going to be a certain chunk of what we're doing. The question is what else? And that was the purpose of the workshop. What are the priority themes of special relevance to developing countries?
What kinds of
and so in addition to adaptation, understanding the process of adaptation. Even on adaptation, there has been a lot of focus on the cost of adaptation. But in our workshop, one of the things that came out was, rather than fixating on this issue of number, trying to fix a number which will be difficult and of dubious quality anyway, focus on the processes by which adaptation occurs, so that whether it is government support, whether it's government policy, whether it's any other sort of way of dealing with it, you can have that a way to make the adaptation processes that communities, people do be more efficacious, more efficient. That's the idea. But in addition to that, people said, well, maybe we need to understand governments and people are looking and using a whole bunch of instruments. Carbon trading, for example, is some people might call it the silver bullet. But let's look at the experience with the CDM. Maybe changes need to be made to make sure that it plays the role that might be needed. Maybe it needs to be changed totally. Another group said, well, look at climate insurance. A third group, which also said, was look at technology. Many places, the farmers will need to change their agricultural technology. What will make them adopt the new crops, and so on. So these were some of the things that came out. And the idea was we should, focus on some of these things that will affect the lives of ordinary people and governments, both at the local level and national level. What can they do? As opposed to just, the standard one of high policy, price carbon. Of course it's important. But for many developing countries, coping with these is important. And that was the thrust from where we came out.
Great. Well, good luck with the initiative.
Great, thanks.
Thanks very much.